Have you ever wondered how far loyalty can go when love is not enough? Imagine a life built around silent sacrifice, where one's choices are shaped by the hope of a better future for all. The silent alliance is not about heroes or villains, but about the invisible ties that unite us, and that can be our greatest strength or our greatest weakness. In a world where appearances are deceiving and self-interest speaks louder, the true meaning of union can be much darker than we imagine. Behind every smile and promise, there is a price to be paid, and many of us pay it without even realizing it. Are you ready to unravel the mystery of this alliance? Get ready, because the truth will not be what you expect. Isabel, a young woman with a pure heart and full of simple dreams, found herself in the middle of an emotional whirlwind. The promise of happiness seemed distant, but the pressure was palpable. Carolina, her sister, painted marriage with Raphael as a magical solution. "It will be our golden ticket," she said, but she didn't mention the price of that ticket. No one explained to Isabel that happiness sometimes comes disguised as a challenge. Imagine being faced with a choice that defines not only your life, but the lives of everyone around you. For Isabel, Carolina's proposal was like a puzzle without an instruction manual. Raphael was a name shrouded in mystery, almost like a character in a soap opera. Isabel, hesitant, thought, "How can you refuse when your family depends on it? How many times in your life have you found yourself accepting something because of others?" Raphael was not just a rich man. He carried the weight of a history marked by an accident that left deep scars on his face and soul. What Carolina conveniently omitted was that what was at stake was not just money. It was the possibility of rebuilding lives, including Raphael's. Sometimes, what seems like a sacrifice is, in fact, an invitation to transformation. Isabel, with her doubts and anxieties, felt like someone crossing a suspension bridge. Each step was uncertain, but necessary. Deep down, she was searching for something that was not in the agreement. Love. It wasn't about money or status. It was about finding a reason to truly smile. This search for happiness, albeit silent, guided her actions, even when everything seemed like a burden. Carolina, on the other hand, saw marriage as a game of chess, where every move was calculated. "Think about the future, Isabel," she would say, with a tone that mixed hope and manipulation. The curious thing is that, many times, those who manipulate others are also trapped in their own emotional traps. Who has never felt used or pressured by someone we love? Isabel's decision was marked by a strange feeling of resigned acceptance. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but, like anyone in moments of crisis, she clung to the hope that something good could come of it. Perhaps Raphael, with his scarred face and his seclusion, had something to offer that no amount of money could buy. Sometimes, the unexpected is the key to incredible new beginnings. And so, the young dreamer said yes, not to a man, but to an uncertain destiny. She carried with her doubt, fear, and a spark of hope. The promise of a new beginning was ahead of her, but what Isabel didn't yet know was that the journey would be much more complex than she imagined. After all, the encounter with Raphael would bring surprises that no one could have foreseen. The mood on the farm began to change when Isabel overheard fragments of conversations among the employees. Whispers about Raphael's accident emerged like pieces of a dark puzzle. One day, the oldest housekeeper in the house, without realizing it, let the details slip. Raphael had lost everything in a single tragic moment. For Isabel, it was like opening the first page of a book full of secrets. After all, who could have imagined that so much pain had shaped this reclusive man? As the days went by, Isabel began to put the pieces of the story together. She discovered that Raphael, before the accident, was a charismatic and admired man, but cruel fate had transformed him into someone the world preferred to forget. People don't know how to deal with what is different, Isabel thought, feeling for the first time a deep empathy for him. Isn't it strange how sometimes we only really get to know someone when we hear the stories they don't tell? Decided to confront Carolina, Isabel wrote a letter asking for an explanation about what was really behind the marriage. Her sister's response came quickly and coldly. "You were always naive, Isabel," the note said, revealing that the plan was simply to provide comfort for the family, without any concern for her or Raphael's feelings. The revelation hurt more than Isabel expected. How many times do we blindly trust those we love, only to discover that we are pawns in a bigger game? Feeling betrayed and vulnerable, Isabel isolated herself for a while. However, her solitude was interrupted by a memory from her mother. True strength lies not in running away from challenges, but in facing them. These words echoed in her mind like a mantra. After all, what is life if not a series of battles that shape us? Isabel decided that she would no longer be a spectator. She would be the protagonist of her own story. Seeing Raphael again, now with the weight of his past weighing on her mind, Isabel saw him with new eyes. The scars, once an enigma, now seemed like marks of survival. He was not a deformed man. He was someone who had resisted the cruelty of fate. Isabel began to realize that perhaps there were more similarities between them than she had imagined. It's funny how, when we learn about the suffering of others, our own pain seems lighter. Raphael, still unaware of Isabel's discovery, noticed small changes in her behavior. She seemed more attentive, more curious, but above all, kinder. For someone who had been abandoned and ridiculed for so long, Isabel's new gaze was like a ray of light in a dark room. Sometimes he thought about telling her the truth, but the fear of pushing her away was greater. What he didn't know was that Isabel was already closer to him than ever. As the days passed, Isabel began to question not only Raphael's story, but also the choices that had brought her there. What did it mean to truly love someone? Could love be born from such unlikely situations? And, above all, could the truth, no matter how painful, pave the way for something new and beautiful? These questions echoed as she prepared to take the next step, a step toward him. Little by little, Isabel began to break down the invisible walls that separated her and Raphael. It wasn't something she planned, but the way she saw him changed. One afternoon, when she was passing by the farm's library, she found Raphael lost in an old book of poetry. Without saying anything, she sat down on the sofa next to him and pulled out a copy of Machado de Assis. It was the beginning of a silent exchange, where written words spoke more than entire dialogues. Raphael, surprised by Isabel's constant presence, began to relax. One rainy night, he invited her to listen to a vinyl record that he had kept dearly. The melody filled the room, but it was the simplicity of that moment that really brought them closer. Small gestures, like sharing a song or laughing at an awkward sentence, created a bond that they didn't even know they needed. Who would have thought that connection could be born from such simple moments? Little by little, their conversations deepened. Raphael, who had previously only responded with short words, began to share stories from his childhood and his passion for music. Isabel, in turn, talked about the books she dreamed of writing, love stories that had always enchanted her. "And do you believe that love can transform everything?" Raphael asked in an almost skeptical tone. Isabel smiled and replied, "I think it's the only thing that really transforms." They began to meet more often without planning. One day, Isabel challenged him to accompany her on a walk around the farm. The fresh air seemed to renew his energy, and Raphael, although hesitant, accepted. He realized that Isabel saw not only his scars, but the man behind them. Sometimes, the simple act of someone seeing who we really are is the first step towards accepting ourselves. Isabel also began to bring lightness to the routine of the house. She taught simple recipes to the employees, reorganized spaces, and even encouraged Raphael to participate. On one fun afternoon, she convinced him to make bread, which ended in a mess with flour scattered everywhere. Raphael, laughing for the first time in years, realized that happiness did not need big events. All it took was someone willing to share the moment. Raphael, touched by Isabel's spontaneity, began to realize that his fear of opening up was diminishing. He even risked showing her some compositions he had written, something he had never done with anyone. Isabel listened attentively, her eyes shining with admiration. It wasn't just support, It was a genuine recognition of Raphael's artistic soul. Sometimes, a gesture of encouragement can be the greatest form of love. Deep down, Raphael knew that Isabel was changing the way he saw the world, and himself. And Isabel, on the other hand, felt that being close to Raphael was making her stronger. They still had a lot to face, but one truth was clear. Something unique was growing between them. Love, like a plant in arid soil, was beginning to sprout, surprising them both. Raphael never imagined he would have the courage to face his greatest fear, the surgery that promised to repair part of the scars on his face. 4 years, he had accepted the mask as part of his identity, a shield against the judgment of others. But Isabel, with her empathy and constant presence, planted an idea in his mind. Perhaps he deserved more than the role of recluse. Sometimes, it takes someone to believe in us before we can believe in ourselves. The day Raphael announced his decision was full of emotions. "I'm going to have the surgery," he told Isabel, with a mix of determination and vulnerability. Isabel held his hand and replied firmly, "I'll be by your side, no matter what." This promise was not just support, but partnership in its purest form. After all, true love is not about correcting the other person, but walking together on their journey. The process was not easy. From the doctor's appointments to the days of preparation, Raphael faced moments of doubt and anxiety. Isabel, always by his side, encouraged him with simple but meaningful words. "Think about what comes next," she would say. For many, the idea of undergoing surgery is not just physical, but emotional. And Raphael felt this every step of the way. The day of the surgery arrived and, while Raphael was on the operating table, Isabel waited outside, rooting for him like never before. The minutes seemed like hours, but she knew that this was more than just a cosmetic intervention. It was a new beginning. Just like in life, sometimes we need to go through temporary pain to achieve something greater. Deep down, Isabel knew that Raphael was not just changing his appearance. He was changing his story. When Raphael finally looked in the mirror after the surgery, there was a silence that said more than words. The scars were still there, but softened, less noticeable. He, however, knew that the greatest transformation was not visible. The courage to face the past and allow himself a different future was the true victory. And Isabel, by his side, saw something new in Raphael's eyes, a gleam of self-confidence that he had not shown before. The recovery was full of ups and downs, but each small step forward was celebrated. Isabel encouraged him to go out more, to try new things. She challenged him to see himself not as someone scarred by the accident, but as someone worthy of love and respect. Raphael began to believe that he no longer needed to hide, that he could build a different life. Isn't it funny how sometimes the right support can completely change our view of ourselves? Over time, Raphael began to accept invitations that he would have previously refused and even became more involved in the local community. He realized that the surgery was just the beginning of a long process of acceptance. And Isabel, with her loving and firm gaze, continued to remind him that what really matters is not what is in the mirror, but what is in the heart. Raphael was ready to live, but there were still challenges lurking, coming from where he least expected. When Carolina showed up unexpectedly at the farm, Isabel felt a chill run down her spine. It was impossible to ignore her sister's feigned regret, wearing a forced smile as a shield. Raphael, still adjusting to the new chapter of his life, did not immediately recognize the threat disguised in sweet words. But Isabel knew. Carolina was not there for love or longing. She was looking for something that would only benefit herself. Carolina, with her usual ability to manipulate situations, began to plant seeds of doubt in Raphael. "Isabel only did what I asked. You know that, right?" she would say, trying to undermine the trust between the couple. She knew exactly how to use partial truths as weapons. Isn't it funny how some people transform even family ties into tools for their own interests? Despite the subtle provocations, Isabel remained firm. She knew that giving in to Carolina's emotional game would mean compromising everything she had built with Raphael. Calmly, Isabel confronted her sister. "You're not here to help. You're here because you saw an opportunity," he said, with a tone that mixed hurt and conviction. For Carolina, hearing those words was like seeing her mask begin to crack. Raphael, realizing Carolina's intentions, was torn for a moment. He was grateful for everything Isabel had done for him, but Carolina's insinuations touched on old insecurities. After all, the fear of being rejected or manipulated again was a ghost he still faced. It's interesting how our past fears can come back to haunt us, even when we think we've overcome them. But it was a simple gesture that showed Raphael where the truth lay. One afternoon, when he entered the living room, he found Isabel reading an old letter from her mother, visibly moved. Without realizing it, Isabel was showing that, unlike Carolina, her love was not rooted in ulterior motives, but in empathy and a genuine desire to see him happy. Raphael then began to see Carolina for what she really was, a shadow of the past that needed to be left behind. Carolina, realizing that her influence over Raphael was weakening, made one last desperate attempt. She tried to change the narrative, painting herself as the victim of circumstances that forced her to manipulate Isabel in the past. But this time, her words fell on deaf ears. Raphael, with the firmness that Isabel had helped him build, finally said, "You no longer have power here." And so, Carolina was confronted not only by the couple, but by the consequences of her own actions. When she left the farm, Carolina left behind more than a failed plan. She abandoned her last chance to regain Isabel's respect and Raphael's trust. For the couple, that episode served as proof that their union was stronger than any external attempt to separate them. But deep down, Isabel knew that the journey did not end there. There was still a bright future to be built, and the next step was just ahead. Isabel and Raphael, finally free from the manipulations of the past, began to transform the farm into something much more than just a simple property. Together, they decided to create a space where art, culture, and hospitality could go hand in hand. They opened the farm's doors to the community, offering music lessons, literature, and even shelter to those who needed a new beginning. Sometimes, the best medicine for the wounds of the soul is to help heal those of others. Raphael, now more self-assured and with renewed confidence, began to share his passion for music with the locals. He was not just the man who had faced an accident, but the man who now had a story to tell. Isabel, in turn, was fulfilling her own dream of becoming a writer. She wrote about life's struggles and triumphs, capturing in words the essence of what she had experienced. What had previously seemed impossible was now happening. The farm became a center of learning and renewal. People came from far and wide to see what Isabel and Raphael had created. They didn't just offer lessons, but a true life lesson about overcoming, love, and redemption. The atmosphere was permeated with a kind of magic that only arises when two souls meet and decide, together, to build something greater than themselves. This is what happens when love meets the strength of a purpose. Even with the success of the farm, what had really changed in Raphael and Isabel was not visible to others. They had transformed their own souls. Raphael, who once feared being judged for his scars, now smiled without reservation. Isabel, who had always sought external happiness, now knew that it came from within. Together, they became living proof that true love doesn't care about appearances, but about what's in the heart. Carolina, on the other hand, saw her life fall apart. After being kicked out of the farm, she tried to manipulate others, but no one listened to her anymore. The people around her began to realize who she really was. In her solitude, Carolina found herself confronted with the choices she had made and the consequences that arose from them. Sometimes life gives us a chance to reflect, but we can't expect it to offer us a second chance to correct past mistakes. In the meantime, Isabel and Raphael continued their journey, now more connected than ever. The farm was thriving, but what mattered most was what they were building as a couple. They showed the world that even after the greatest hardships, there is always the possibility of a new beginning. And that, more than anything, was true victory. True beauty lay not in what they had, but in what they had become. As the years passed, the farm became a symbol of rebirth for many. Raphael and Isabel, with their unbreakable union, showed that love can be the most transformative force in the universe. No matter where we come from or what we've been through, the future always offers the possibility of writing a new chapter. And for those willing to believe in the power of change, a new beginning is always within reach. Now that you know the story behind the Silent Alliance, the question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Are you willing to take a closer look at the silent alliances in your own life? How many times, out of fear or conformity, do we accept what is imposed on us without questioning it? True change begins when we decide to stop accepting lies and start living according to our truth. Love, sacrifice, manipulation. All of these elements are present in our daily choices. It's time to take control of your destiny, not letting anyone or anything define who you are. If you believe that true transformation begins from within, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue learning how to write your own story without fear of starting over. Your journey is just beginning. Are you ready to take the next step?